This is the
Five Stars
Podcast.
Let me talk to you.
Yeah, gotta talk about bad wrestling. Yeah, shameless Shark Week plugs. Yeah. Should we just go with the 40-second recap? I don't know. Nah, part of me wants to have fun tearing that Dynamite main event to shreds, but the other side of me just wants to kick back with my hands folded behind my head with a big old smirk on my face that reads, "I told you so." This is what the marks purport to be good professional wrestling these days, huh? Yeah, I'll bet. Whew. What a stinker. Well, now that we've determined that AEW is a complete flop of a wrestling company, now we can move on to the retro portion of today's podcast. Gonna keep it short and simple this week. No, I kid. No, you see, after having been subjected to watching this hot garbage on Wednesday night, I'm going to make you all suffer through this one with me. We are going on the roller coaster ride this week. So strap in, put on your barbed wire seatbelts, and prepare yourself for the next installment of Botchamania. In fact, the next Botchamania is just going to be Botchamania AEW Dynamite, barbed wire everywhere. That's the whole video. Just clip after clip after clip after clip of anything and everything that could possibly go wrong in a wrestling match. It was all encapsulated in that total abomination of a main event. Before we rip that one apart, though, let's get some plugs out of the way. This is the Five Starr Wrestling Report podcast, where the only thing you're ever going to hear on this show are opinions and wrestling takes that no one else will ever give you on the modern product. We keep it as real as we can on the FSWR podcast. So if you actually appreciate good wrestling and you know what good wrestling once looked like back when it drew money and actually created megastars, well, you're going to like honest takes on this channel. So make sure you are subscribed, like the show, leave a comment, and also come back each week to check out the podcast on Monday and Friday for new content. We are here on YouTube and Rumble. Links are always in the description. Today, in addition to the Dynamite debacle, we've also got the continuation of our retro review series on NWA World Championship Wrestling and World Class Championship Wrestling. Two extremely stellar classic shows that I got to watch this past week. Unfortunately, both of which I watched before Dynamite on Wednesday, which just totally killed my buzz after having watched those retro shows. The other problem, too, was I was already kind of tired on Wednesday night, so I was very irritable before the show even began. So that probably didn't help anything. But since I'm already kind of tired now, we're just get the AEW review out of the way as quickly as humanly possible, because I am not giving that garbage program any more time than it deserves after what it presented to me this past week. So take a sip of my coffee there and let's get into this monstrosity. Brody King versus Darby Allin in the opener in a grudge match. Why is it a grudge match? I don't know. Because Excalibur said so. That, and I don't watch AEW Rampage anymore, so I guess these two had a brawl or something in the last week. So, yeah, AEW logic. Guy gets laid out on the rampway, and that automatically sets up a blood feud between two guys who have had no prior interaction beforehand. Unless they fought in a bar somewhere in an outlaw promotion in front of 20 or 30 drunk fat fucks with tattoos. And in that case, I still don't care. So within the first 30 seconds of the opening bell, here's what happened. Darby drop-kicked Brody out to the floor, went for a suicide dive. Brody immediately caught him and threw him into the barricade on top of his neck. Then Brody threw Darby back into the ring so that Darby could fire back up, fail at a crossbody attempt, and then Brody swung Darby around by his belt loop and chucked him back out of the ring to the floor for a second time. That all happened before I even had a chance to type the first bullet point for my notes to even write down what the goddamn match was to begin with. So they come back from break, and after Darby had spent about 80% of the match taking a beating and selling, his comeback sees him take off his belt. He wraps the belt around Brody's ankles and yanks him out to the floor so he can hit him with a flying cannonball. And at that point, Darby proceeds to no-sell everything that Brody did to him prior, and the guy is moving around at the speed of Superman for no reason. Or with the analogy I like using, a video game character with never-ending stamina. Because that's what everyone is in this company, right? Everyone is a video game character that can magically spring back to their feet and start hitting 80 moves in a row despite having been worked over moments prior. Because the people don't pay to see guys sell or express pain, agony, and blues. No, they pay to see corkscrew planchas and choreographed routines. Because that is where we are in 2022. They also had a potentially good finish to go with, which they ended up spoiling because no one in this company knows how to agent anything properly. Brody put Darby in another one of those hangman sleeper deals on the ring apron, which I believe they did that spot when Brody won the Battle Royal on Rampage. And after Brody drops Darby out to the floor, Paul Turner begins the 10 count. And what they could have done, if they actually wanted to do something logical and believable for a change, God forbid they actually try to get someone's move over for once, they could have had Brody win by count out after Darby struggled to beat the count but failed in the end. But no, instead Darby does what every inexperienced worker does now, where he lays there motionless on the mat for a count of 9. He leaps up to his feet at 9.5 so that he can beat the 10 count. Also, Brody could immediately hit the guy with another move and beat him. And the finish looked like it right about killed Darby. Brody basically deadlifted the guy and spiked him with a sit-out pile driver, but it didn't even look like he was trying to protect the guy. Looked impressive enough where I thought Darby was dead, but it's also not something that I would advise people be taking, especially with the injury list AEW's racking up these days. And I will be frank, as soon as Brody started beating on Darby after the bell, I immediately fast-forwarded through the rest of this thing because I knew where it was all going. All I saw was Sting come out to confront Brody. He tried to set him up for the Scorpion, but Malachi showed up for their 735th blackout in about 2 months. He and Sting did a stare down, and somehow Miro wound up on stage staring down the heels after Malachi misted Sting in the face. And I've already touched on this before, but I will reiterate in case there are any new viewers. The House of Drek have complete go-away heat with me at this point. I don't want to see them anymore. Everything they're involved with on this show just takes me out of it. Their act is stale. And I'm even at the point now where even Miro is not enough to make that program worthwhile. Because anything that Malachi touches at this point just turns to shit. He was somebody that worked well under the WWE umbrella because there were people agenting and heavily involved with his booking to make sure that he didn't do anything hokey or stagey. And so far, everything I have seen with Malachi and AEW has been way too much of that. He has too much leeway with his own segments, and while he might think that his shit is good, and some of the marks might think that it's good, trust me when I tell you, it's not good. I've been saying that Malachi needs to go away for a while and come back under a different gimmick or repackage, and well, since Tony isn't a good enough booker or promoter to see that, the House of Drek will continue to suck teat. So coming back from the break, we had Tony interviewing, exactly as I wrote down in my notes, a young generic man. His name was apparently Cole Carter. And if you were to ask me to provide a biography rundown of the man, I know about as much of Cole Carter as I do about multivariable calculus. I've never seen the guy before. I have no idea where he came from. And of course, because these people are morons, their one opportunity to provide some context as to who the fucker is, well, he's immediately interrupted trying to cut a promo. So I had no idea what was going on here, which is nothing out of the ordinary with what I've come to expect with this stupid program. Apparently, he answered an open challenge for Ricky Starks' FTW title, so they're going to have a match later on. Speaking of stupid, Trent Beretta and Chucky Finster had a completely useless tag match with the Grease Monkey attendant and Hot Wheel Yuta. And here's everything I wrote down about this segment because I got up to go to the bathroom during this. Why are the best friends still a thing? Why are they doing another babyface versus babyface match for no reason? And Orange Cassidy continues to prove that he adds nothing of value to the professional wrestling business, both as a wrestler and or a promo/commentator. By the way, one of these guys is our AEW World Champion, everyone. Just keep that in mind. So then Shivani brought down Keith Lee and Swerve Strickland, and I intentionally did not write down brought them down to do a promo, because if you have watched this show for more than 2 weeks, you pretty much know the story with any time Tony is in the ring with a microphone. He brings someone out to ask them a single question, and the wrestler proceeds to take the microphone from Tony while he backs into the corner and stands there like a dork. And evidently that either leads to an interruption or an immediate brawl. This one wasn't so paint by numbers with the interruption, but we all knew it was coming eventually. It always does. First, Swerve Strickland did some plugs for his new album drop. He really didn't say much beyond that because the fans were trying to start up the usual "You deserve it" chant, which they do every single time a title changes fucking hands. It's so annoying at this point. So then Keith got on the stick and proceeded to sing a promo. I can't even say he spoke the promo. He began accentuating words as if he was preparing for them to edit the promo in auto-tune mode. But he also didn't get a whole lot out before Tony Nese and Mark Sterling interrupted to, for whatever reason, push this goofy storyline with Sterling trying to get signatures to petition Swerve out of AEW. Why, I have no idea. I can think of like 20 other guys off the top of my head that I would rather see get petitioned out of AEW before Swerve Strickland. But they ended up confronting Swerve's talent agent or rap artist, whoever the fucking guy was. I don't care. I mean, I think rap is utter trash anyway, so I wasn't going to know who he was regardless. Anyway, he ended up coming past the guardrail and bitch-slapping Nese and dropping him like a fly. No security, by the way. They just let him pass the barricade, no problem. So, just give the fans incentive to jump the rails at any time, I guess. And way to make your roster look inferior, Tony. Thumbs up there. Anyway, the punchline to all of this is that the end saw Swerve caking Sterling. And if I told you that it got a popcorn fart reaction, that is probably being generous. An angle that once used to get over like wildfire when Jim Cornette was the one that took the cake to the face. Here in 2022, they have bastardized it to the point where instead of it being a payoff to a major storyline with the goal being to humiliate the heel manager who's been a thorn in the side of the company since he showed up, here it is a completely pointless comedy angle in the middle of a crappy wrestling show. Hence, no one cared. That brought us to Christian Cage and the Luchasaurus versus the Varsity Blondes. After they did another rotten segment with the job order in the back. And remember when I said last week that the Luchasaurus Christian pairing wasn't doing a whole lot for me and that it was missing something to sell me on the dinosaur being a heel? Apparently that missing something was a fucking game plan. I was going to palm slap myself in the head, but I don't know how well that would have picked up on audio. So we'll get to the whole big angle in a minute, but I just wanted to ask this real briefly. Have the Varsity Blondes ever been booked in an angle or segment where they weren't made out to look like absolute geeks? Remember when Brian Pillman Jr. was actually getting babyface pops from the crowd, and there was like a genuine interest in seeing the guy get a little bit of a push? Booker of the Year really shit the bed on that one, didn't he? I mean, the initial segment was fine for what it was designed to do. Christian's the best heel in the entire show right now with MJF out of the equation, so the whole thing was the dinosaur mauling over the blonde so that Christian could get the big tag at the end to steal the pin. And it worked perfectly as a heat spot. And then came the post-match stuff. And this right here is a prime example of anyone that actually believes Tony books things well in advance or has any idea of where he wants to take things 6 to 12 months down the road, you're a tool. The post-match angle sees Jungle Boy make his big return to television after having his head caved in with a chair in front of his mom and sister a few weeks back. Also after having just lost the tag belts. And of course, he comes out from the back carrying a chair in hand, and he is in absolutely no rush to charge the ring and get his revenge on Christian for what he did to him. Nope. Instead, he casually strolls down the ramp with a dumb look on his face. He confronts the dinosaur at the bottom of the ramp, and then for absolutely no discernible reason, with no build-up or anything, the dinosaur steps to the side so that Jungle Boy could then proceed to chase Christian through the crowd, never having actually gotten his hands on him at any point. And while Jungle Boy and Christian completely disappear into the ether, never to be seen again or spoken of for the rest of the show, the segment ends with Luchasaurus just shrugging it off and walking up the ramp like, well, guess I'm a good guy again. So, yeah. So much for that Luchasaurus heel run, right? Long-term storytelling, huh? Yeah, this company is just superb in that domain. Seriously, I don't even know why I bother getting invested in anything this company does.
They ruin everything. How do you screw that up?
Said I was going to get that drop one way or the other, but I think that one's going to show up at least once per AEW review. Guaranteed. Moving right along here, though. I'll say one thing about having Jim Ross come out for Hour 2 commentary. At least it gives me the indication that we're at the halfway mark of the program. Sort of a palate cleanser to say, hey man, only one more hour to go. Take a deep breath. You can push through this one. But that led us to the FTW Championship match. Ricky Starks and who in the fuck is Cole Carter? And I know I've spent a lot of time burying AEW's complete ineptitude when it comes to getting anyone over. But let me at least take a minute to put over Carter based on what I saw here. And again, this is only after having watched one match of his. He's a good-looking kid. He's got a pretty good physique. He's tanned. He's got some height and size to him. He looks like an athlete. And he did some fine stuff in this match. I think he was supposed to work as the babyface here, but unfortunately the crowd was too pro-Ricky, so that kind of blew up in their faces. But he has a nice drop kick. His punches looked all right. Had some good fiery offense in the early stages. I don't know who's training him or who's been scouting him, whether it was Taz or someone else in the company. But this is a rare example of AEW scouting the indie scene and finding someone that actually has some kind of potential. I mean, I'd be pushing this kid over that Takesha dude from the DDT promotion that supposedly wrestles blow-up dolls and emaciated Japanese girls that weigh about as much as a small dog. This is the best match on the show by a country mile, at least for the kind of wrestling that I prefer. Wasn't the best segment on the whole show, but easily the best match. I continue to say it. Ricky Starks is a fucking megastar in the wings. I'm not sure that Tony is ever going to be smart enough to catch on to it, because that wouldn't appease the egos of the Omegas and the Beta Buckses of the world. So, initially they were good here. But, of course, AEW showing their complete inability to ever leave well enough alone. Because after Ricky Starks retains, he tries to do a heat promo to set up a second challenge. And who should come out but Danhausen? And I said, oh, child, please. Yep. They set up the inevitable. On AEW next week, it is Ricky Starks versus Danhausen for the FTW title.
Like, they ruined everything. How do you screw that up?
More horrible acting with the girls. Cringe level acting. To the point where you could actively tell that even Chris Statlander was uncomfortable here. She just... You could not have found anybody else that gave off the vibe that they could give two fucks less. Then we had FTR out for a promo segment to save the entire show from eternal damnation. Even so, by the end, I don't even think Dax or Cash could have saved this one. But if this doesn't win Promo of the Year outright, then whoever is voting on these End of the Year awards truly are the dumbest fucking marks in the history of the business. So they're out there. Obviously, they're plugging their match for this coming weekend with the Briscoes for the Ring of Honor tag belts. It is now 2 out of 3 falls, which I did not know beforehand, unless they threw that stip in there last minute. But it starts off great with Cash doing a fiery babyface promo, talking about how Mark and Jay Briscoe have laid the foundation for keeping tag team wrestling alive and well, but FTR are out to prove that they're the best tag team in the world. And they could have ended it right there, and it would have been great. But then Dax began recounting a story about a young girl who had been dealing with a series of heart issues as a young child. And the girl was taken to several doctors, and eventually it was concluded that there was a small hole at the bottom of her heart, which could patch up over time if she stayed strong and kept fighting. Otherwise, they could do open heart surgery on the poor girl and might lead to some complications. And Dax said that that girl fought and clawed and worked and stayed strong every single day until the one day they went back to the doctor to learn that the hole had healed up entirely and she was healthy to live her life to the fullest. And that young girl was no ordinary girl. That young girl happened to be Dax's baby girl. And it's stories like that that give Dax and Cash the inspiration to continue to fight, scratch, and claw every day of their lives to achieve their goals. So Dax assures us that he is going to fight like an 8-year-old girl on Saturday when they fight the Briscoes, take him to school, and he's going to win the match for his family and fans. I shed a tear. You want to know why FTR are among the best in the business today? This promo. That is all I need to say. It almost made the entire show worth the watch just to get to this point. It was so goddamn good. And I was already sold on the match by the name value alone, but after having heard this promo in full, I'm really sold on this thing now. I want to see FTR beat the Briscoes in round 2 so that Dax can win the match for his baby girl. Wrestling never has to be complicated. And the proof is in the pudding with segments like this. It is easily the best babyface promo I've heard all year. I don't remember a whole lot about the Cody Rhodes promo post-WrestleMania. Maybe I'd have to go back and watch that again to get some context, because I know people were raving about how great that was. The MJF shoot was an entirely different animal because it was a heel promo, and quite frankly, we're yet to see if that actually pays off in any significant manner. But this FTR promo was fire, man. It's like, it legitimately pisses me off too, because if AEW could do several of these things in a given week instead of all the other garbage we see them do, I might actually be able to give them more credit. Because it's shown that they can do shit like this. Like, it's befuddling to me. I don't get it. Regardless, though, beautiful stuff in this segment. That was followed with Jade Cargill and Kiera Hogan versus Athena and Willow, which I also skipped over because, well, reasons. By the way, nothing related to wrestling, but serious question here after listening to Jade's promo. This is a question to all my men out there that are not completely blue-pilled and spineless fucks. Would you ever consider dating a woman that proudly calls herself a bitch? Talking about waving the proverbial red flag. Once again, not a single chick in this match had normal colored hair. Yet another red flag. I'm still getting absolutely nothing out of seeing Athena in AEW, which is not surprising because Tony signs people without a game plan and then wonders why people get cold. And the baddies won after Jade hit the chicken wing slam on Willow. Nothing else to say about it. But it all led to this. The main event. The most preposterous and retarded thing I think I have seen in wrestling since the exploding barbed wire death debacle with Moxley and Omega a couple years back. It is a no DQ, false count anywhere, barbed wire everywhere match with Chris Jericho and Eddie Kingston. And again, why is this a barbed wire death match? Well, why not? I mean, come on. It's been, I don't know, at least 2 weeks since we've seen a no DQ gimmick match on this show. So, yeah, I'd say we're about overdue for a bloodbath. Can't go more than 1 week without someone doing a blade job, am I right? Am I right? And the absurdity with the whole thing begins right from the jump, as Justin Roberts is doing the ring intros for this whole thing while holding a barbed wire microphone. Because this is comedy, you see. I also took note of the barbed wire crash pad. Remember that for later on. And of course, it is immediately jump-started with Kingston grabbing the microphone from Roberts so that he could hit Jericho over the head with it. Also, Jericho could blade within the first 8 seconds of the match. Also, great job being sure to capture Jericho gigging in the act. Got to do everything we can to expose the business. Oh, and it must be noted here, Ruby Riott was just randomly sitting ringside the whole time this thing was going on. Just chilling. Totally unconcerned about her well-being and safety while these two men are having a fucking hardcore barbed wire death match. Why don't you just put up a sign that reads, "This is all fake. We're playing around." No, but you see, there was a purpose for this. Not a good reason, but there was a reason. The reason Ruby was at ringside was because she was apparently the gatekeeper for the shark cage. Yes, there was also a shark cage applied to this match, because everything must be a hat on a hat in this company. And they put Ruby Riott in charge of operating the shark cage while it was hanging above the ring. Because that makes sense, right? You got two grown men out there doing a dangerous anything-goes death match with gimmicks and barbed wire, so they're putting the 100-pound girl at ringside in the middle of the action to operate the fucking shark cage. Because this is clearly something that would happen in real life. You're going to put the female in harm's way while two guys are having a street fight. So yeah, they had a shitty hardcore match. Aside from what I just talked about with Jericho gigging in the first 10 seconds of the match and the camera making sure to film it, they use every ECW gimmick in the book, including barbed wire boards, chairs, tables, the whole gamut. I'm surprised no one thought to break out the barbed wire blow-up doll at any point. It's also made more infuriating by the fact that despite them doing everything they could to expose the business here, they're using actual barbed wire and they're legitimately slicing up their bodies like corned beef. With Kingston, I'm not all that surprised, but well, these days, I guess Jericho is even stupid enough to do this shit to his body at age 50 or however old he is. Oh, and speaking of Ruby, not done with her yet, because the girls played a key role in this segment. What happens is, while Jericho and Kingston are in the middle of this anything-goes street fight, while they're cutting each other open with all this shit, out runs Ty Conti to get into a scuffle with Ruby, and while the girls are having a fight in the middle of a barbed wire match, just need to keep reiterating that point, the cameras completely stop filming what is going on with the guys so that they can film Anna Jay coming down to turn heel on Ruby and lay her out, as if anyone could possibly give a shit about any of these girls at this stage. So they throw Ruby into the steel post and basically render her dead. And that was preceded with a series of LOL AEW moments wherein Ty Conti went to lower the shark cage to let the heels escape. And of course, she has possession of the key to the door to let them out. And because nothing ever goes right for this company, the key doesn't work. Which the announcers draw attention to, and they begin laughing at the stupidity of the whole thing by cracking jokes about it. Thanks, Taz. Also made better by the fact that because nobody in this company knows what they're doing, the production truck does not bother to take the camera off of Ty as she is visibly struggling to unlock the cage. Instead, they continue to film this to let everybody know, hey, look at this dumb broad. Can't even unlock the fucking shark cage. Everybody point and laugh. And we all did. So after about 10 seconds of finger fucking around with the lock gimmick, eventually the Jagoff Appreciation crew just say, fuck this, and they all manage to slip themselves through the bars to charge the ring and start running blatant interference on Kingston. So, thank God for small favors, I guess. Skinny, frail wrestlers actually have a use for something in the professional wrestling business. They can slip through cages whenever something goes horribly wrong with trying to unlock the door. And at this point, the whole thing just became a sea of bodies doing random shit. Eventually, the babyfaces come running out to wreck shop and distract more from the match. I remember at one point, Ortiz came in to hit Jericho with the loaded sock, which of course was not the finish, because why would it be? Jericho got put through a table for a near fall at one point. The crowd died with each passing minute this kept going. And finally, the finish saw Sammy Guevara run into Superkick Eddie, and then to help set him up so that Jericho could hit him with the Judas effect to pin him flat. We also heard the masked clown inform us that we have not seen Sammy since Kingston threw him off the top of the cage in blood and guts. So 2 weeks ago. But we weren't done there. Because remember that barbed wire crash pad I was alluding to at the beginning of the segment? Well, because these people's sense of time management is ass, they still had to get their shit in at the end here. So after Jericho pins Kingston with his finisher, the Afterbirth sees Kingston pretty much immediately no-sell everything so that he could bonk Sammy and Jericho together in one of the most horribly contrived things I think I've ever seen on a wrestling show in my entire life. Just complete miscommunication from all parties involved. And then Kingston very quickly shoved Jericho out to the ring apron by his ass so that he could throw him off of the ring apron into the spider trap with about 3 seconds left of airtime. Because it was ever crucial that Jericho went through this gimmicked crash pad. And the final image of the show we see is Kingston sitting on the ring apron with his hands on his hips like, God, could that have gone any worse? And the answer is no, Eddie. No, it couldn't have. That was a perfect, horrible segment. What a shit show. An honest-to-God clusterfuck of epic proportions if I've ever seen it. Not that anyone should be surprised. I mean, we all knew this was going to be garbage. Because what else is new? Every hardcore match AEW has ever done is pure garbage. They've never done a single hardcore anything goes false count anywhere match in their entire existence that wasn't total garbage. I mean, even the marks were giving this one shit after the show was over. And rightfully so. Because this was embarrassingly Bush League in every way imaginable. WCW 2000 is rolling in its grave right now watching how this whole fiasco went down. Vince Russo couldn't have booked a more perfectly stupid segment if he tried. Epic fail. Jericho needs to go, dude. I'm sorry if anyone out there is a fan of his, but this guy has become a total cancer to this product. Everything about the Jericho Appreciation Society storyline sucks. The feud with Kingston has sucked. Everything they've been involved with together has sucked. And him going over Kingston here is a prime example of letting the inmates run the asylum. Whatever midlife crisis Jericho is going through right now, he needs to take it and he needs to deal with it off camera. Because the Chris Jericho of 2022 is not the same Chris Jericho I saw when he first came to AEW. I was very optimistic about Jericho as the first AEW World Champion, and I can even go back and recall watching a lot of his segments before the pandemic, and I remember a lot of his stuff used to be some of the best material on the entire show. But ever since that Orange Cassidy program, man, Jericho has jumped the shark as far as I'm concerned. No pun intended with the shark theme for the week, but seriously. That guy has done nothing productive for this company as of late. He's not getting anyone over, and this whole feud with Kingston hasn't done anything for anyone. It hasn't elevated Kingston in any way. Jericho's faction of geeks continued to be nothing more than just that, geeks. And I'm going to say this, and I know this will piss a lot of people off, but I'm going to say it anyway. Chris Jericho has become the Jeff Jarrett of AEW. A guy that continues to hog the spotlight well past his point of relevancy, who does nothing but drag the show down with virtually everything he's involved with. And that's not to demean Jeff, because I respect everything that man has contributed to the wrestling business. But I'm also not going to sit here and pretend that there wasn't a period where I was sick of seeing Jeff Jarrett on screen, whether it was WCW or TNA. I was already overseeing Jarrett as an on-screen character during the dying days of Nitro, then having to put up with it for another decade in TNA wrestling didn't help matters any. But the comparisons are very similar. Much like Jarrett had go-away heat with me during his run in TNA, Jericho has the same go-away heat with me in AEW. I respect what Jericho has contributed to the business over his career, but I don't need to, nor do I want to see him anymore. And I can't imagine that I'm alone in that thought. You know, at this stage, I'm seriously starting to wonder how much of Danielson's injury is a work or a shoot. Because the way he kind of fizzled out from the equation with this whole thing is really getting me thinking, maybe Danielson has been looking for an outing to distance himself from this entire program. And frankly, who could blame him? I mean, if you're Danielson, would you want to be tied with all this horse shit? Going from having the best wrestling matches with everyone on the roster to being a bit player in faction warfare with 50 other dudes. I don't blame Danielson if he wants to pull out from all this. I honestly don't even know what else there is to say about it. This feud needs to die, and everyone involved needs to go their separate ways and never associate together on this television show ever again. And like I said with Jericho, just go away, dude. Seriously. You're not adding anything to the show anymore that justifies you being on camera. This whole ego trip experiment you're on right now needs to cease fire. Because as long as you're continuing to involve yourself with these horrible segments and come up with all these bad ideas every week, all you're doing is holding down everybody around you. So do us all a favor, and while you still got a shred of credibility to your name left, GTFO. This is coming from someone that still has a little bit of respect for you. Just don't burn it all out, man. Get out while you still can. So anyway, how about that good wrestling content for the week? So as we move on to the retro part of the show, this is NWA World Championship Wrestling from July 19th, 1986. We begin the show with Tony Schiavone doing the intros for the program, as we are in Columbia, South Carolina for this taping. Also had David Crockett back to do commentary, and what a bundle of joy that man was on this broadcast. It is always noticeable when Crockett is missing from calling the ring action. Say what you want about him. A lot of people loved his commentary, a lot of people hated it. But the one thing that you cannot deny about David Crockett is that man brought life to what he was doing. Even something as uninspiring as Don Kernodle versus the Golden Terror, which was the opener. It was kind of funny that one of David's opening lines in this match is talking up the fact that the show is filled with, and I quote, exciting, great action, unquote. Meanwhile, I am watching Don Kernodle and the Golden Terror laying on the mat in chin locks and looking like two left-footed ducklings out there. I mean, to be honest, you could even tell David was fishing for ways to bring energy to this segment. Although I did like the fans trying to start a random USA chant at one point. Beyond that, though, the rest of the match consisted of the announcers putting over how winded and fatigued both men were, which has a tendency to happen when you have two green job guys trying to wrestle for 10 straight fucking minutes. My guess is somebody missed a flight and they were trying to stall for time. Otherwise, I cannot give you one single good explanation as to why they gave Don fucking Kernodle versus the Golden fucking Terror 10 minutes. It was so dull and uninspiring, I didn't even bother writing down who won. Somehow I didn't fall asleep, though. And then we had a Jim Cornette Big Bubba promo with Bob Caudle, who was conducting interviews for this show, alongside Cornette when the heels would come out. And of course, Cornette's doing his usual heel shtick where he's firing off a bunch of one-liners and gotcha quotes. One of which I believe he was talking about Bubba growing up in a bad neighborhood, and he said something to the effect of, Bubba's neighborhood is so run down, when you go into a restaurant, they're serving broken leg of lamb. And there were a couple other funny quotes in there. But the only thing I think the entire time this promo was going on, Cornette is trying so hard to get Bubba to break kayfabe and crack a smile, and no matter what line he drops, he fails every single time. What a champ Bubba was. But the main gist in the material here was him continuing to hype up the Bubba Dusty program. They planted the seeds for it after the phenomenal chair shot angle of doom, where Bubba had to no-sell a wooden chair shot to the head. So they're off to the races with that feud. I believe a program that did not pay off until February of 1987. Long-term storytelling. So then the Warlord smashed Vernon Deaton in 30 seconds with a running power slam. And after it was over, I can confirm 1,000% Warlord killing Vernon in under a minute with one power move got twice the pop as Don Cornado and the Golden Terror going 10 minutes, which they just killed the crowd entirely. We also had some strategic outlining from Coach Schiavone during this match. He asserts that staying away from the Warlord is not the best offensive strategy, as opposed to what? Running straight at him? The fuck kind of strategy is that? If I were Vernon Deaton, I'd have been doing everything I could to avoid letting the Warlord get his hands on me, which in part means running away from him. Don't ever take coaching advice from Tony Schiavone. By the way, also still never explained why Baby Doll is managing the Warlord around this point. And for historical reference, I still have no idea why Baby Doll managed him for a short period. So then we had Arn Anderson doing a promo with Cornette. And they're hyping up the August 2nd showdown between the Minnesota Wrecking Crew and the Rock and Roll Express in a bunkhouse brawl. And Arn's basically covering the fact that they can do anything and everything they want to the Rock and Roll Express and nothing can stop them. And while Arn is talking, Ole walks into the frame with a t-shirt that reads, "Evil, Mean, and Nasty." All of which are very accurate descriptions of Ole Anderson. Ole was also great in his promo delivery, where he vows that in this bunkhouse match where there are no rules, everyone can guarantee that the Andersons are going to cheat. Just saying the quiet part out loud that yes, we are dirtbag heels, therefore we're going to use underhanded tactics and try to cheat to win. Boo us. And I'm also like 90% sure Ole promised that Morton and Gibson would be dead by the end of their match in Fulton County Stadium. Guess you could get away with saying that stuff back in 1986. And for the record, before we move on here, no, I have no idea what the gimmick was that Ole pulled out during this promo. Then Todd Champion wrestled Crusher Khrushchev. Still a very odd visual for me to picture Crusher Darso wearing long tights when, for most of his career, his gear was short, tight singlets. They had a fine match, although it was funny listening to the commentators try and compare Todd Champion to, of all people in this company at the time, the Road Warriors. In what universe? Because they were all pushing 3 bills and jacked to the gills? I mean, okay, I guess in that aspect it makes sense, but to compare Todd Champion to either Road Warrior Animal or Hawk, it's a bit of a stretch. Crusher ended up going over with the sickle. Then we had a Dusty promo with Baby Doll standing by, and he begins his promo with selling everyone on his upcoming cage match with Ric Flair. Says that regular cage matches are risky business, but when you put Dusty in a cage with anyone, that is, and I quote, riskier business. I also loved his line where he says that they are going to construct the steeliest cage in the business. The steeliest of all steel cages, daddy. As opposed to a regular steel cage, I guess. No, it's going to be the steeliest of all steels. God himself could not construct a cage with heavier steel. So that was all well and good. There was also a part in here where he was rambling about mayors and local agents trying to book him for personal appearances, and I had no idea what the fuck he was talking about. Nelson Royal versus Mitch Snow. I presume no relation to Al Snow. I wrote down exactly one sentence about this match. Nelson won with a small package after they bored me to tears for about 3 minutes. And if anybody out there can find information on the background of Mitch Snow, please send it my way, because that's I couldn't find anything on the guy. Luckily, Tully's interview afterwards made up for it, referring to Ronnie Garvin here as Glassjaw Garvin, basically declaring that everyone wants to take down the Horsemen, but they will all fail when it is said and done. And JJ threw in some words about the fact that after Tully knocks out Garvin with ordinary wrist tape, he will not be seeing multiple skydivers sailing in for the bash. It'll just be the birds he sees after Tully knocks him loopy. Good heel promo. Coming back from the break, we had some Waylon Jennings-inspired country music. So on Peacock, that was probably canned-in music. And that transitioned into the Great American Bash update, where they brought us back to the highlight last week of seeing Baby Doll punch Jim Cornette in the back of the head and give him a concussion. And I believe I have seen that visual about 8 times between the span of last week and this week after watching it on a loop several times over. Still never gets old. I also have to point this out because this is just how my twisted mind works. Bob Caudle is talking about how on the last Stop of the Bash tour, there is going to be a big fan giveaway. And the location that this will take place at Fulton County Stadium will be at Gate J. And I swear to God, I'm not even kidding, I had to rewind this like 5 times in a row to get clarification that Caudle did not say gay. I just figured he was dropping the word gay about 30 times here for no reason, but upon going back and listening again, I'm like, oh, okay, I guess he said gate. His enunciating wasn't very good. And that was followed with him bringing in the Rock and Roll Express to cut a quick promo, hyping up their match with the Anderson brothers for later on. The only thing of note I really took away from it was Robert Gibson not remembering what the name of Ole and Arn's team is, or whether or not they were brothers or cousins. And the best part is him not caring at all. Then we had Sam Houston versus Tully Blanchard for the Nation Heavyweight Championship. A little bit of a typo there in the graphics. And I've also declared this match a 6.5 star match based on the first minute alone. Purely by the fan reaction of watching Houston run wild on Tully and hit him with just about every fast-paced offensive move in the book and getting a couple near falls on him. Sam Houston said to himself, "This is my one chance at glory and goddamn it, I'm going for it." What a great opening sequence. There was also a great cat and mouse chase deal where after Tully slapped Houston in the face, Houston began chasing Tully around on the floor, and there is a spot where Houston tries to wind around to clock Tully with a left hand. I'm not kidding you. Had JJ been literally 2 inches to his right, guaranteed Houston would have knocked that guy out cold. I've also determined, after having watched this match in full, as well as the Wahoo match from last week, that Tully Blanchard was the Bryan Danielson of 1986. Dude could wrestle a broomstick and the match would still be fantastic. I'm honestly trying to think off the top of my head. I don't think I can name a single bad Tully match from any of the reviews we've done since November of 85 when we started this retro series. That man could be paired with anyone from generic job guy 101 to top of the food chain babyface. Every single match he had would have been phenomenal. And of course, that's not to dismiss JJ's role because, he was very pertinent to what made Tully segments great. So I don't want to discount what he did. Even things as simple as JJ distracting Tommy Young so Tully could throw Houston over the top rope before they pitched to a break, or at a later point in the match, JJ whacking Houston in the back of the head with his shoe. We talked last week about how great it was being able to see them do these Superstation shows from bigger venues in front of thousands of people. This is the reason why it's so effective, man. It's one thing seeing JJ do this kind of stuff in the Atlanta studio in front of 50 people and getting admonished for it. It is an entirely different animal when you've got 8,000 people booing and screaming and trying to legitimately jump the guardrail to get at this guy just for hitting the babyface in the back of the head with his shoe. And the cops are legitimately having to hold these people back in the front row. particularly the older women, which is pure comedy. Tully ended up going over with the slingshot suplex, which the crowd totally shit on. They were not happy with seeing Tully retain his national heavyweight title, despite the fact that he was still scheduled to wrestle Ronnie Garvin on August 2nd for the final stop on the Bash Tour. These people didn't give a fuck. For their money, they'd have rather seen Sam Houston wrestle Ronnie Garvin for the national heavyweight title if it meant that Tully was not the champion going in. That is how much passion and vehement hatred these people had for the heels back in the day. Then we had a Crusher Khrushchev interview. I wrote literally nothing down here aside from him promising the Russians were going to win gold and stand tall. Then we had probably the best Ronnie Garvin promo I've ever heard him cut on the Superstation. Him and Bob Caudle are out there recapping and revisiting the footage of the Tully Houston match, and Ronnie was doing his best at trying to put over Sam, while at the same time unintentionally burying him for being young and stupid and not working the match the right way. Which, I mean, that's a little bit of a drastic statement. It wasn't that extreme. But I did like the way they did this, because Ronnie basically established the kind of veteran worker Tully is, and he says that when he goes in there and faces Tully in their big showdown on August 2nd, he's going to work smarter and he's going to terminate Tully Blanchard. Coming back from the break, we had Magnum TA doing a fiery babyface promo on his best of 7 with Nikita. At this point, he's down 3 matches to 0, and now it is do or die for Magnum. But even at the disadvantage in the series, he says he's not out of the woods yet, but he'll make his comeback to punish Nikita and reclaim his United States Heavyweight Championship. It's, did hit me pretty hard here. And again, this is with historical knowledge and watching this in retrospect years after the fact, but there's a line in here where Magnum is talking about how he's back on his feet, ready to fight with no injuries and no distractions. And then you start thinking that by the fall of this same year, about 3 months out from now, Magnum TA is essentially forced to retire from in-ring competition altogether after a tragic car accident in Chesapeake, Virginia. Yeah, I know this is entirely off topic, but I figured since we're on the subject. You know, I've gone back and watched that interview he did with, whatever that guy's name is. Annabelle, I think. He has a YouTube podcast. I think he works indie events, whatever. But I've seen that clip of Magnum talking about the story, and it's such a difficult video to watch because the guy is obviously very spiritual, and he has such a positive attitude when he's recounting that story in full. But you can even tell it's really hard for him to tell it. And as a fan, you know, someone that watched Magnum TA clips at an older age and saw his progression through that first time I saw him on Mid-South back in like 83 or whatever it was, fast forwarding all the way through his run in Crockett Promotions to the end of 86. That is the model of a hardworking man. You know, I actually saw growth in Magnum's career in that short window between 83 and 86. And, you know, just, can you imagine what it would be like for someone in today's business that's in the peak of their career like Magnum was at the time, like 27, I think he was, having all that momentum behind you, only to have it all yanked away on a freak accident that had nothing to do with wrestling? You know, that's why you hope and pray that guys like MJF stay healthy and safe, because with what few beacons of hope we actually have left in modern wrestling, you know, the young boys in particular are the ones that I'm always worried about. And especially in today's business where everyone is working the riskier high offense style on a consistent basis. I mean, people are getting hurt and hurt more often these days, but you just hate to hear stories about people's careers getting cut short because of accidents that are totally out of their control. And then we had our tag team clinic between the Anderson brothers and the Rock and Roll Express. And to tell you the truth about this, there's a part of me that just wants to tell you, go find the match on YouTube or If you have the Peacock subscription, go watch it there. Because I don't think my review of this match will do justice as to how fucking phenomenal this whole thing was. It was one of those matches where I get so mesmerized into what the guys are doing, I almost forget that I'm supposed to be taking notes. It's also a reflection on just how far tag team wrestling has truly fallen in the last 30 years. It's why I'm actually genuinely excited to see FTR and the Briscoes again this coming weekend, because their first match was so damn good. And because they're actual tag team wrestlers that do tag wrestling the correct way, it is a match that I actually want to see because I know that they'll do it right. In 1986, we saw that quality level of a tag team match almost every single week in some capacity. Whether it was house shows, spot shows, special events, or television. Back when there were more than 2 actual good tag teams in the business. But this is a real clinic, man. They went the full 20-minute Broadway, obviously counting the commercial breaks as well. All 4 guys worked their asses off. They're sweating profusely by the end of this thing. Like Robert Gibson in particular looked like a wet sheepdog, just covered, drenched in sweat that guy was. But there were so many good elements and stories that they derived during this thing where even though the match went 20 minutes, it didn't feel like a 20-minute match. And that's probably the highest compliment you can ever give a match, when you can just sit back, watch it, enjoy it, and not get caught up in the length of the time. Where you're not looking at your watch every 5 minutes wondering, when are they going to go to the finish? God, this is great. Yeah, the one interesting thing of note, and not that this was out of the ordinary for a rock and roll match, but I think we all remember the classic Rock and Roll Express matches for Ricky Morton being the underdog babyface in peril, and he would eventually make the hot tag to Robert Gibson. Well, here, because they were going long, they did a role reversal in the early stages where it was Gibson selling for the heat portion of the match so that Ricky could get the initial hot tag. By far, my favorite part of this match is a spot where Gibson and Morton are working over Ole's ankle on the ground. And while Robert's the legal guy, he pulls the ref over to distract him while Ricky Morton begins working over Ole's ankle in the ropes illegally. And because this was back when the people were elated to see the heels get their asses kicked, of course it gets a massive babyface pop. There was also a great spot way early on in the match where Ricky Morton lured Arn Anderson in so they could hit him with a front-face DDT on the bridge of his nose, which Arn sold perfectly. And that is key, because if you all remember, they had done the angle weeks back where the Horseman mashed Ricky's face into the ring mat and destroyed his nose. And remember, he was wearing that face guard for weeks after the fact. So here's your little comeuppance payoff. But you know what? Now that I think about it, by far, the sole highlight of this entire segment, without a doubt, David Crockett. If there's ever the segment to epitomize David Crockett being an absolute mark for the babyfaces on this show and not even trying to hide it, this match. End of sentence. The best one was right before they pitched to their second commercial, I believe it was. The babyfaces are in control, and David was pissed that they had to cut away from this as he was watching the Andersons get their asses kicked. Keep in mind the fact that he's calling this match live at the time. He is angry that they are having to pitch to commercial. Meanwhile, he's going to get to see the Rock and Roll Express continue to beat up the Andersons during commercial, while we, the viewers at home, were not going to see it. David was still angry about this. And of course, they went through their second heat cycle where Ricky was the one selling this time. And I love the finishing deal here, because they're basically talking about how this match is winding down due to the time limit. So Robert just decides, you know what? Fuck it. And he runs into the ring, starts wailing away on the heels while Tommy Young loses total control of everything. And figuring that the match was going to expire in the time limit anyway, Young's just like, all right, whatever. No sense in trying to regain control now. And it is all pandemonium in the closing moments until the Rock and Roll Express finally get the Andersons in simultaneous sleeper holds. but the bell rings for the time limit expiration. And I guarantee you, if they did that finish in 2022, the fans would have probably shit on it and booted out of the building because there wasn't a decisive winner. Because unfortunately, modern fans are stupid and uneducated. But because this was 1986, and all the fans saw were the babyfaces putting the heels to sleep and standing tall by the end of the segment, who gives a fuck? The babyfaces are standing over the heels. That is all that matters. Who cares about seeing Ole or Arn get their shoulders pinned to the mat? All we want to see is Ricky and Robert standing strong at the end of the segment. And that is exactly what we got. Phenomenal match. Better than the Midnight Road Warriors match from last week. And if you all remember, that was a fantastic match as well. Mostly notable for the afterbirth of seeing Baby Doll club Cornette in the back of the skull. But that match was also great. But here's the other thing to keep in mind too. Those are two entirely different matches with completely different stories they were playing up. Which also goes to show the level of extraordinary talent of the tag scene around this time. But as great as that Road Warriors Midnight match was from last week, this was better. And that's no offense to Eaton Condrey or Corny. I'm sure even if Cornette went back and watched both matches, he would probably agree with me that this Anderson rock and roll match was probably the better match. It almost hurts me saying it because the Midnight Express are probably my all-time favorite tag team, especially the Condrey and Eaton pairing. But these four men tore the house down on this particular show. What I would have paid to been able to see that live. All I would have needed was to be born a year earlier. Damn shame. And after the whole thing was over, and I'm saying to myself, wow, what a great close to the show. Only to then realize that it was not the main event of the show, as we still had a Midnight Express versus Dusty and Magnum tag title match. And I'm not even joking. Here are my notes on the entire segment with approximately 2 minutes left of airtime. 3 bullet points. Dusty calls for Cornette to get in the ring with Baby Doll. Cornette ducks out last second after attempting a cheap shot. And Bobby Eaton proceeds to be a punching bag for Dusty for about a full minute before they cut to the ending credits. That was the entirety of the segment. Our second time seeing Dusty in action on the Superstation since we began these reviews in the fall of last year, and both of his matches we have seen in the last week have lasted a combined total of 1 minute and some change. Neither of which had decisive finishes. Yep. I'll be damned if I say it. His segments still end up getting about 10 times the reaction as anything we see in the modern business, where guys try to do 45-minute spectacles, and they're lucky to generate a quarter of the reaction these guys get. For literally doing nothing. I'm not even joking. They did nothing in this entire match. It's crazy. So, yeah. That show was pretty damn outstanding. Just skip over the Golden Terror Don Kernodle Borefest and you'll probably be fine. It's also a good indicator of showing you that you don't necessarily have to have a strong card from top to bottom for a wrestling show to be fantastic. A little bit of revisionist history for a lot of modern fans out there, but at the end of the day, the people are mostly going to remember the latter half of the show anyway, so as long as your main event and higher-end matches deliver, who cares about all the prelim junk? Because it's all it is, it's junk. No one's going to remember the Golden Terror versus Don Kernodle 8 seconds after it happens, but they'll sure remember that Rock and Roll Anderson Brothers tag match, especially when it happens at the tail end of the show when it's fresh in people's minds. So, before we move on to World Class, real quick, next week, there will be another gap week without an NWA review because they do not have a July 26th Superstation show. That date was actually the special Bash Tour date from the Greensboro Coliseum, where Dusty beat Flair in the cage to win the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. But they did not air a Superstation show that particular day, so we'll be holding off until the following week to get back with the NWA reports. And by that point, the Bash tour will be wrapped up and they'll be planting the seeds for Starrcade come December. So, guess we'll have that to look forward to. Anyway, onward and forward to World Class Championship Wrestling with our new opening graphics, where we appear to be in space. Because if there's one place that we associate world-class wrestling with, it's space. Although, now that I mention it, wasn't it like a few weeks ago where Dusty Rhodes did a promo on the TBS Superstation talking about how he wanted his feud with Ole Anderson to end in space? Huh. Maybe he got his inspiration from watching World Class's opening montage circa 1983. So our opening match was a trip down memory lane, going back to the Reunion Arena Star Wars event. They showed us the pre-tape match of Lola Gonzalez versus Vicky Carranza. And I know what you're thinking. Oh boy, a girls' match. So how bad was it? Well, if we're trying to be fair, I'd say it was slightly better than a WWF Divas match circa 2000. Maybe worse than the normal AEW girls match we see in a given week. Regardless, it still wasn't very good. The only reason I say it is maybe worse than an AEW girls match is that at least this match saw the girls actually performing wrestling moves and working body parts at various points, instead of watching the modern women try a bunch of springboard shit that they have no idea how to pull off correctly. Don't really know a whole lot about either girl's backgrounds. I was able to find out that Gonzalez did a lot of traveling around the United States as part of the NWA Hollywood Wrestling out of Los Angeles. I believe that was when Mike LaBelle was running the company when she was around touring. Vicky Carranza, there's virtually nothing on her in terms of bios or articles pertaining to her background or training. I think her wiki page has maybe a single paragraph devoted to her. Like I said, match wasn't very good at all. The pinfall attempts were particularly ugly in this match, mostly because the falls would see one of them try to cradle or small package the other, and while they are laying there motionless in these pinfalls, the referee is... I can't even say he was hitting the mat for the three. He was very gently and lightly patting his fingertips on the mat while counting three. And all the while, the girls aren't even struggling to really power out of these pin attempts. It's like they're holding each other in these pins completely still, and as the ref brings his hand down for the 2 count, that is when they kick out. Like they were visibly watching the ref's hand come down, which they probably were, let's be honest. Match totally fell apart at the end there, and the finish was horrendously botched. Well, honestly, I can't even say it was horrendously botched. It was just clear as day that they were going for the O'Connor roll reversal where Gonzalez tries to roll her through, but she doesn't really have a firm grip on Carranza's legs, so Carranza basically has to sit down with her ass on Lola's face to get the pin. I guess some people would find that kinky enough to work, but yeah, no good. Still a million times better than Jenna versus Charmel. I will give them that. But that is okay because it was followed with the greatest segment I think I have ever seen on World Class TV. In fact, it was so great, I watched the whole thing back again after the fact and laughed just as hard the second time. We were promised that we were going to get to see the full video footage of Jimmy Garvin and Sunshine doing David Von Erich's dirty bidding. And boy, did this deliver in spades. So just to recap everything, the storyline was that the NWA management were sick of David Garvin Texas Heavyweight title matches ending in controversy, so they devised a plan. Whoever lost the fall in their next outing would have to be the personal valet for the winner, And sometime within the span of the Reunion Arena show and now, they did a phantom title match where David won the belt back from Garvin, which forced Garvin to be David's assistant for a day. And this was gorgeous Jim Garvin at his peak awesomeness. For anyone that didn't grow up watching Garvin and want to know what made that man so great, I direct you to watch the David Von Erich Jimmy Garvin pre-tape on the Von Erich farm on the July 23rd, 1983 edition of World Class TV. We begin this thing with David and Mercer standing in the driveway, awaiting Garvin and Sunshine to pull up in their car, and when they arrive, David makes Garvin get out of the car so that he and Mercer can get in, and while Sunshine, who is driving the car by the way, takes them to the back 40 of the property, he makes Garvin walk the distance. And all the while, Garvin is rightfully moaning and complaining that it's like 115 degrees and humid as fuck, factoring that they are in the middle of goddamn Texas. Also, I'm not entirely sure about this, but I believe that in addition to Garvin having to walk the distance on foot, I guess that meant the cameraman also had to walk because he continued to film as the car drove off. So David is also apparently a dick to the camera crew. So then we cut to a shot where Garvin is digging holes. Honestly, I'm still not entirely sure what he was digging holes for. I guess they were fencing posts or something. But this is also great because while he's digging, they pan the camera out to show Sunshine sitting on the grass while David is kicking back in a lawn chair holding up his rifle in the air. And while Garvin is bitching and moaning about this, that, and the other thing in the most over-the-top manner possible, David fires his rifle over Garvin's head, which then promptly causes Garvin to take a face-first bump on the grass. And the hilarity continues as they then cut to Garvin and Sunshine cleaning one of David's dogs. And this is by far the best part of the whole thing because there's a part of me that wants to believe this dog performed a shoot on Garvin and Sunshine where as soon as they tried to switch places so that Garvin could hose down the dog, Sunshine let go of her grip on the dog, which then caused the dog to take off as they're trying to run him down. And after watching this back, I'm 100% positive that Sunshine broke character and started laughing because Garvin is legitimately trying to hose this fucker down, but he continually hoses Sunshine because the dog will not sit still. Meanwhile, she is soaked and covered in soap suds. Her hair is totally mangled and damp, and there's no way she wasn't laughing during all of this. But God bless Garvin for keeping a straight face through the whole thing. We then had Garvin and Sunshine having to carry hay bales across the property, and once again, because David is a dick, he made them walk the distance instead of letting them use his truck to drive them over. Also made 10 times better with Garvin making Sunshine drag one of the hay bales, and while Garvin has one draped over his shoulder, he's yelling and berating Sunshine, who is valiantly struggling to lug one of these big hunks of hay behind him. Because you see, everybody, Jimmy Garvin is a prick, and even though he knows that these things are heavy as fuck and are probably at least 3/4 of Sunshine's overall weight, he doesn't care. So that was a sight to behold. Watching poor Sunshine destroy her back trying to pull a square bale of hay across property. She did a better job than I probably would have. I probably wouldn't have gotten 1/4 of the way that she did. And the whole thing ends with an apropos brawl sequence in the barn, where after Garvin tells David that he ain't cleaning any horse stalls until the cameras shut off, both guys get into a shoving match, and it ends with both guys stumbling into one of the stalls while Mercer calls for the camera to cut away as he tries to break them up. This is the greatest thing in the history of wrestling, I've determined. It is easily the best comedy segment I've seen in wrestling in Lord knows how long, and this is important, a comedy segment in wrestling that actually makes sense because it had one sole design: to make the heel look like a jackass. Or in this case, heels, because Sunshine was also included. Everyone worked their role to perfection. Jimmy Garvin is one of the truly most underrated and underappreciated heels in the entire history of this business. David was phenomenal. Mercer kind of standing by and watching the whole thing take place. Like, you could tell that guy was having the time of his life. Like I said, this was so wonderfully done. I went back and watched the whole thing again and laughed through the entire thing a second time. And you know what's great about this? This just goes to show the talent level of all these guys back in the day. I guarantee you, they did this all in one take. Undoubtedly. They didn't need to do 1,600 camera cuts or 15 revisions or any editing, any of that stuff. They shot this thing in one go and said, put it on television, man. That is gold. And not going to argue with it. It was pretty damn good. Dear Mr. Tony Khan, here is how you do comedy and wrestling correctly. I'm skeptical to advise you even try, but if you are, do shit like this. Instead of ramming the stale and lame company mascot down my throat every week. So that was a 5-star segment. That was followed with Johnny Mantell versus Michael Hayes, which was not as good as watching Garvin be a lackey for David, but it was still entertaining. Here's the thing with Hayes, and I'm sure I may have mentioned this before, but Hayes was not the kind of guy that you accredited as the workhorse of the Freebirds. In the ring, he was not a skilled technician, but he was also somebody that knew the art of subtlety. He could get by with facials and bumps alone, and especially in the Dallas region, that is all the people cared about. All they wanted to see was Hayes get his butt kicked, and when it was time for Hayes to sell, he made sure he made it look good. I believe I heard Mercer also drop the prancing peacock line in here again, much like he did on last week's show. Not sure what Mercer's obsession was with peacocks in 1983, unless he was a fortune teller and could predict the future of streaming services in 2020. Not the most technically sound match, but Hayes went over with the second rope elbow drop after holding the ropes to reverse the Russian leg sweep attempt. Then we had Chris Adams versus Terry Gordy. And once again, I go back to what I just spoke about in the Michael Hayes match. All the people wanted to see where the Freebirds get beaten from pillar to post, and they didn't care who it was or how it was done. And, Chris Adams was a much better worker than Johnny Mantell, so this was a more exciting match because of it. There's a great sequence where Adams hits like 4 or 5 big moves in a row on Gordy, and one of the spots saw Gordy duck a leapfrog attempt, and as Adam comes off the ropes, Gordy takes an intentional backdrop. For what reason, I'm not entirely sure, but in thinking he was going to outsmart Adams, Adams just comes off the ropes and hits the guy with a senton splash. There was one major highlight in this entire thing, though, and it had nothing to do with the ring action. The single row of women who were all behind Terry Gordy, including one of the women wearing a shirt that said, "Charlotte loves Terry Gordy." These women had balls. That's all I can say about it. I don't even want to try to imagine the kind of trouble they ran into in the parking lot with the Dallas crowd after the show was over. I can only hope they live to see the next day. I've also determined that Terry Gordy takes the best bump of the super kick I've ever seen. Not since the days of watching The Rock take Steve Austin's stunner would I actually go out of my way to watch a guy oversell a move and not be angry about it. A great finish, too, with Adams hitting that overhead German suplex pin. Once again, gotta remember this, Gordy was not a small guy. So seeing Chris Adams be able to hoist that guy up overhead like that, it was very impressive to see. And they got a little bit of heat back on Gordy afterwards after he laid out Adams with the Samoan drop. It's good seeing them elevating Adams into those higher profile spots now, because it was something that I talked about in the last couple reviews, how it seemed like it took forever for them to start getting Chris Adams in some meaningful programs on this show. But as great as that match was, it could not hold a candle to this main event. Buddy Roberts versus Bruiser Brody, where the entire story behind the match was the Iceman paying Brody a $500 sticker price to reveal Buddy Roberts' bald head to the world. Michael's opening lines to Buddy before the opening bell was trying to pump this man up by using the old size of the fight in the dog cliche. So, of course, what happens after they ring the bell? Well, Buddy proceeds to try and jump Brody, only to get his ass kicked immediately after the fact. Beautiful. And, of course, while Brody is trying to pry the headgear off of Buddy, Hayes is getting involved with picking at Brody's ankle and trying to save Buddy by pulling him out of the ring. Some of this happening in plain view of the ref, who decided to not call for the DQ at any point. But they did a quick heat sequence where Buddy leapt off the second turnbuckle and gave Brody a flying headbutt with his headpiece, which stunned Brody for a minute or two. And finally, Brody reversed a bulldog attempt and successfully removed Buddy's wig. But here's the twist. He only got the wig. He did not get the full headpiece. And after it was over, Hayes pulled Buddy out of the ring, put a towel over his head, and David Manning called for the DQ. And after the heels scurried to the back, they had Mercer conduct an interview with the Iceman and Brody ringside. And of course, the Iceman's dishing out his $500 for Brody, thanking him for a job well done. However, Brody says that he only got half the pie. Promised he was going to remove Buddy's full headgear, but he only got the wig. So until he gets the helmet off, he's only going to take half his pay. To which the Iceman responds by simply nodding his head and probably thinking to himself, well, I'm not going to insist on it. I'll take half my pay back. And I also love the closing lines here, as Mercer's trying to get some final words with Brody on his future program with Kamala. And Brody responds by counting his money and then going, "Thanks, Bill, thanks." And he walks off, probably not even paying attention to what Mercer was saying to him. Great stuff here. And looking back, if we skip over the first 10 minutes of the show with the women's match, which didn't add much of anything to the show, everything from that Jimmy Garvin pre-tape to the rest of the program was fantastic. And listen, I'll say this because I know it probably seems like I'm always looking for an excuse to bury how bad AEW is so that it can put these classic shows on a pedestal. At the end of the day, it's subjective grading. How you feel about some of this classic content is always going to be dependent on what you grew up with. I get it. But it's also important to understand the impact of watching these retro shows and what the main takeaway from everything is. A lesson to be learned for anybody that's running a major company today. Less is more. The best wrestling shows I've ever seen come from when you keep things simple and logical. You don't have to cram 40,000 things onto one show. You don't have to produce edgy content and drop F-bombs and blow up shit and slam people's arms in car doors and mash people's faces into barbed wire or jab knives into people's eye sockets to produce quality wrestling content. Most of the stuff I just listed off is garbage anyway, and we see it virtually every week on one show. World-class wrestling is a prime example of how you produce quality wrestling content without needing to go overboard with everything. A term I subconsciously throw around a lot of the time is overprocessed. And that's what a lot of modern wrestling feels like. AEW and WWE both alike. Nothing is organic. Nothing comes off as original anymore. It's either recycled material from companies that went out of business over 20 years ago, or it's artificially contrived bullshit where every time you watch it, everything just comes across as fake and scripted. My preference is watching wrestling when, even if I knew that it wasn't real, at least I was presented with the illusion that the boys tried to make it seem real. Back when they at least had enough respect and wherewithal to make people think it was real. And for me, that's all I ever wanted as a wrestling fan. I just want to know that whatever I'm watching is being presented in a way where I can buy and believe that it's authentic. I believe that MJF is authentic. I believe that CM Punk is authentic. I believe that Bryan Danielson is authentic. And lo and behold, it's why their segments are always the best thing on the entire show. I don't believe Chris Jericho is authentic. I don't believe Orange Cassidy is authentic. I don't believe the Beta Bucks are authentic. Fucking Christ almighty, I don't believe anything those guys do are authentic. I don't believe a lot of what those guys do are authentic. Because I watch the way they work and the way they carry themselves. None of the shit those idiots do comes off as real to me. And I know for a lot of you AEW fans out there, it's something you might not like hearing. But I'm just giving it to you straight as someone that watches that product every week and continues to be frustrated with the way Tony Khan continually runs that company into the ground. And y'all can think everything's fine right now with that company, but perspective is key. And history will dictate who is right or wrong about their perceptions and opinions on AEW based on where we find ourselves 5 to 10 years down the road looking back. I don't want for AEW to go under or fail. I want this current bullshit television product that I'm watching right now to go away, and I want a good television product to come in and replace it. Because whatever this shit is they're doing right now, it's not working. Maybe for the main market and the key demo they go after, it works. But telling you this now, numbers don't lie. There's a reason that Rampage viewership continues to decline and why Dynamite ratings have stagnated and have not grown or budged an inch in almost an entire year now. And you can sign all the ex-WWE talent you want, guys. Ain't gonna make a lick of difference in the end. What you need is someone with a brain that understands the business to come in and provide feedback on how to better improve the quality of your product. And that's gonna mean you gotta delegate some tasks, Tony. You can sit there in your little booking bubble and pretend that coming up with a bunch of video game-inspired matches is going to make the show better. Newsflash, dude, it won't. I promise you that. Bischoff did the same thing on Nitro in the late 90s, where he constructed an entire 2-hour show around a bunch of random TV matches that no one gave a shit about. And the only thing that carried that show for 2 years during the peak of the ratings war were the angles that featured the real megastars of the time. And right now, with your current roster, you don't have any of those megastars right now. Sting is the only one you get as far as someone that comes off as someone remotely that carries star power. But that dude is way past his point of relevancy as an in-ring performer at this point. How we got on this topic, I'll never know. And why I just thought of it after we finished the AEW review, I also don't know. Perhaps because I was fuming so much during that Dynamite report, I just couldn't think straight. Regardless, that'll take us to the end of this one. Hopefully the Ring of Honor special this weekend leaves me with some good vibes, because it is a show that I'm genuinely looking forward to based on the card they've announced. I know the FTR Briscoes match will be fantastic. Joe and Lethal I'm expecting to be good. Demon Martinez for the women's title should be alright. And now that I found out recently that Claudio is getting the Ring of Honor world title shot against Jonathan Gresham, that's another match that I'm totally sold on. I totally expect Claudio to win the title, and yeah, that's no offense to Gresham or anything, but I mean, seriously, has the guy made more than 2 physical appearances on AEW since Ring of Honor closed down shop at the end of last year? Claudio's red hot right now. It would be his first major world title win in any company, so while we can have the argument over whether or not ROH's world title means jack shit at this point, this will be a big moment for Claudio. So I'm looking forward to it. On top of that, we'll also have the WWF Retro Raw report and the NWA Power report to cover as well. So it'll be a packed show from top to bottom. Looking forward to it. Till then, take care all. Peace out.